Let's first talk about the fact that, everyone needs to have insurance. Obviously, there's some people who do not. There's many ways to get insurance through work, buy it on the exchange, go to an insurance company, talk to an insurance agent. People pay a lot of money for an insurance company to cover their risk. So everything with insurance is about a risk. If you jump out of airplanes, that's a risk. If you drive a motorcycle, that's a risk. If you eat poorly, that's a risk. So, all of these things in our lives, we know at some point everyone is going to have a claim. Now, the best thing to do is get through your life without a claim, but that will never happen. So, we depend on our insurance companies to insure our risks. Are you tired of having your insurance claims denied? Do you want to know how to get the payouts you deserve? You're in the right place. Each week, me and my guests are dedicated to empowering you with the knowledge you need to navigate the complex world of insurance claim denials. With over 50 years in the claims game myself, I'll make sure you are guided through writing compelling claims appeals, understanding your insurance plans, navigating healthcare laws, and filing effective insurance complaints. Join me, Mary Covington, on today's episode as I teach you to simplify the intricate world of insurance while helping you confidently secure your claims, relieve your stress, and ease the financial burden of unpaid claims. Now, let's fix those claims.
All right, so we're getting started today. I am so excited. We're here from Fix My Claim to go over Fix My Claim podcast. My name is Lee Kasholi. I am the corporate services director, and I'm here with Mary Covington, the insurance lady. And we are going to talk about why insurance companies deny claims.
Yes, we
And
are.
I know you have a lot to talk about because that's what you do every day, what we do every day. So we need to understand the possible reasons behind someone's claim denial and better prepare, people need to better prepare themselves for fighting back, right? They need to secure the coverage for their loved ones and their family themselves. So maybe we can talk a little bit about, why this matters to people. Can you explain to me why people are having problems with their denials and what that does to the families?
Well, let's first talk about the fact that, everyone needs to have insurance. Obviously, there's some people who do not. There's many ways to get insurance through work, buy it on the exchange, go to an insurance company, talk to an insurance agent. And so people pay a lot of money for an insurance company to cover their risk. So everything with insurance is about a risk. If you jump out of airplanes, that's a risk. If you drive a motorcycle, that's a risk. If you eat poorly, that's a risk. So all of these things in our lives, we know at some point everyone is going to have a claim. Now, the best thing to do is get through your life without a claim, but that will never happen. So we depend on our insurance companies to insure our risks. So if we have a claim, we have a burst appendix, we get cancer, we have mental health issues, we want to know that our insurance company is going to step up to the plate and be the one to pay the claim that I have for my medical care or my mental health care. And so without that partnership between you and your insurance company, you are responsible to pay those bills. And there's nothing worse than having been to the hospital and going to your mailbox and getting an insurance company EOB, an explanation of benefits, or a statement from your provider, your facility, or your doctor saying that the insurance company denied your claim.
Ooh, denied. So what feeling is going through someone who like opens up their mailbox and they look at this piece of paper and it's like denied? And I mean, what are you gonna do? Like how does someone feel at that moment when they're, got this bill and they thought the insurance was gonna cover it?
Well, I'm sure there is a heck of a lot of thoughts that go through one's head, like, How the hell did this happen? And oh my God, I thought it was authorized. Or Jesus Christ, what in the holy hell is the insurance company doing? What did the facility do? What did the provider do? So at that point, I always get heart palpitations. I don't know about anybody else, but there's
Oh my gosh, how stressful would it be? Like you've just been in an emergency room and you're like recovering and you get this denial and it's like, and that's like one of 5 bills you get from the different carrier or the different, like maybe you hella lifted and helipad into the hospital,
oh, sure,
right? And
you
then you've
get
got
you get a maybe an ambulance.
anesthesia and it's like
Yes,
denied, 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 and you've got like, $300,000 bill. Like what is going on, right? But
correct.
what would happen if you like got the bill and you knew what to do?
Well,
That would
if
be
you get the bill and you know what to do, first thing, investigate. You have to know what happened, and you want to look at the reason that the insurance company says it's denied. So, insurance companies deny claims for, I think at some point, I want to say there's about 52 to 57 different reasons insurance companies deny claims.
you.
52 to 57 in my work over the last 34 years, about 52. A lot of them are similar, always the same ones, but then you get some one offs. So you do get a variety of denial reasons. So the denial reasons usually surround either something related to a medical necessity denial. And medical necessity can include custodial care denial, and they said your care is experimental or that it's investigational or unproven. And then on the other hand, you can get a denial where they may say the provider isn't covered in the plan. They may say you weren't eligible for coverage on this date. They may say the service isn't covered. So there's all different reasons why they deny. So zeroing in on that denial reason is like the most important thing you have to do first. So
Right.
that should be the first
I got
part
a
of
question for you
checking
though.
your claim.
I got a question for you though. You said something about custodial. What's that?
Custodial care is usually something where they believe that you're just being housed in the facility and there's no actual care of the treatment being rendered. So that occurs with elderly people that may be in skilled nursing and or in a hospice situation, they'll say, well, the patient isn't getting any care. They're just giving feeding, bathing, eating, dressing. So there's no care like therapy being given. That type of denial is very suspect in most cases.
So what about some kind of like maybe a mistake, from the hospital group where, they just coded it wrong or, what about those types of denials happen a lot as well?
Yes, you do see processing errors and coding problems. Those are a couple of more denial reasons that you might
Mhm.
see. So that would lead you back to the billing company or the program that billed the claim. Also, you don't get to see the claim, you just have an EOB. So you're sort of only got half the story. And so also, we don't grow up learning coding. We don't grow up learning what a UB04 is or what a HCFA 1500 form is. And we don't know what that means or what's supposed to be on it. And so you need somebody that can look at it with the right eye. There are times,
How
go ahead.
if you're gonna like get an EOB, you said that's like where you see your denial reason. What's supposed to be on an EOB, explanation of benefits? How is that like, how do I know what I'm getting? Like, I mean, I have to be honest, just a little bit honest. Those emails come across, your EOBs do. I'm like, oh, just put that in our save folder. Like, I'll look at that later.
Yes, and that
Perfectly
usually
normal.
is a mistake to do that. I would
Oh,
not do that. I always open my any letters from an insurance company because everything in claims has a time frame. But let's go back to what you just said. What's on an EOB? And some they call it a notice of claim, an explanation of benefits, an explanation of payment, and they all have the EOB or EOP or So you want to be sure that you get the gist of what that is. You used to get them in the mail. Now you just get a notice that there may be one on your portal.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure you're registered on your portal to go in and look at the claims. Now, if you
What
have your web portal at your insurance, so you set up
Oh,
a
your
portal.
insurance
Mhm.
benefits
So
portal. Okay.
most of the time, the insurance companies are it's sort of like your credit card all going online now. Nobody mails you a bill hardly. You're online paying. So the insurance companies went the same way with EOBs and EOPs and notice of payments, et cetera. So you have to be able to get on there. And in an EOB is just a snapshot of the claim. So it will always, and it's usually landscape looking. It can be a portrait in a portrait format or landscaped. And so if it's landscaped, it usually has your name, your policy ID number, your group number, and then it will put the doctor's name or the facility's name, and there may be multiple ones on the same EOB. So if you went to the hospital, there may be the hospital and the surgeon, the
Mhm.
anesthesiologist, the lab, the radiology, all on the same EOB. So, but it has the date of service off to the left, then the facility name, and then the amount that was billed, and so it's got columns. So you're looking at the columns. And so after the amount of the claim, then they put what they allowed. And then they put if it was a provider adjustment because they're contracted. And then they'll put your deductible, how much they applied to your deductible, if any, how much went to your coinsurance, because insurance companies pay claims at 80% or 70% or 90%. And so 10%, 20% or 30% may be your responsibility. So that will be in the coinsurance column. And then they'll usually put what they paid. If they denied anything, there'll be a denied column. And then there's usually a remark. They number the remarks. So if there's a remark code or a notice code, you'll look at it. And then at the bottom of the EOB, they'll read what that remark code says.
Okay.
So that takes you back up to the reason they denied that portion. And maybe it was the adjustment because it was a contracted provider. So you go down to the bottom of the EOB and they'll say, this was a contracted provider. This amount is not anything you owe, right? So,
Yeah, those are pretty confusing though, right? I
right.
mean, I would assume that people we talk to on a regular basis are not very familiar with what's on the EOB.
Well, the biggest thing you want to zero in on is your responsibility. So at
Mhm.
the end of the row on the EOB will be a thing that says your responsibility. So
Well,
if
that's taken out
if
everything
it's
they've
a
applied.
$10,000 bill and $10,000 is sitting in your responsibility and there's nothing showing they made any payment to the facility or to the provider, then you're in trouble. You gotta look. So
Yeah,
don't just forget it. Then you gotta look at the remark code, you gotta go down, you gotta figure it out, and you gotta go, "Okay, why was this $10,000 not paid?" Maybe it was paid previously. It may say it was a duplicate. Fine. That means it was previously paid, but you should have already known that because you had an earlier EOB that would have shown payments. So then you can go, "Phew, okay, that's no big deal."
yeah.
So getting to the bottom of your claims. And I always think it's advisable for families to maybe set up a spreadsheet of the claim so you can keep track of it. Many families do. Some of the insurance companies have gotten so bad that now they just give families summaries of what they did. So that is a bad thing because you don't know what they did. So hopefully you can get on your portal and have more than a summary. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida, summaries. We have to call them to figure out what they did. So sometimes you're going to have to
What's wrong with the summary? I mean,
it
what
doesn't it has
detail?
no detail.
Like nothing, no denial reason, no
No,
nothing?
nothing. Nothing.
Just here's the amount you owe?
Here's the amount you owe and here's what we paid. And you don't know anything. And maybe you
Wow.
have a big responsibility, but you don't know why.
So at that point, you can call the insurance company and get more detail if you don't have it, right?
Yes, you can probably ask them to send you an EOB or get them to go over those columns that I talked about. How
Okay.
much was the claim? What did they allow? What did they deny? What went to my deductible? What went to my coinsurance? And you write it down so you can get to the total. By then, you should have a statement from the doctor or the facility, and you should be able to do a comparison of the summary and the EOB versus what the doctor's office did with the money when they got it. So you want to take that EOB, and when you get your bill, you want to take the time to compare that and make sure that it's
You
accurate.
so you have a bill from the doctor, which usually has some kind of insurance payment listed there, right?
Correct.
And then you're gonna have an EOB, so you're gonna wanna make sure that those match.
Exactly.
Or what would the doctor be able to tell you maybe why you were denied?
They might. They have access to systems where they can look up claims, especially if they're a participating provider with the insurance company.
Right.
They've got access to systems like Availity and, other
Mhm.
places where they can go to look at the claim themselves. Because they're like an accounting office. Their accounting office has to post the cash, they have to post the denial, take any
Mhm.
adjustments that the insurance company tells them, and then at the end, there may be a $30 copayment that you owe. You may have paid it on the front end. That will be there and your account will be 0, or maybe they're gonna bill you the copay if you didn't pay it when you went in.
Right, you probably wanna keep the receipts from the doctor's office too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you
So
you
so
do.
what's so here we're talking about EOBs, we're talking about, kind of this administrative technical. So, I mean, from an insurance company's perspective, like, how do they process the claim to get to the point where they're gonna say that you're not covered or medical necessity? Like, what's a perspective of, because you worked for an insurance company for a while when you first started in insurance, right?
Yes.
There's a policy or there's some perspectives. What is the insurance company's perspective on this? Because you paid your premium, you're expecting to get covered when you go to the doctor.
That would be correct. You are expecting to get paid, no doubt. So, what the provider does, and you have to think about whether or not the provider's in the network participating or if they're out of network. So those are kind of separate issues. So what we'll talk about is contracted providers first, participating providers that are in your network. Those claims, and usually if they're participating and they're contracted, they're going to do the pre-authorization, they're gonna do the billing of the claim. They're gonna do maybe some minor appeal work if there's a coding problem. They're gonna take care of that stuff because that's what they do as a contracted provider.
It's like internal to the
Correct, but you have to
provider, right?
remember
Internal.
the insurance company has an actual contract that they've signed up with the doctor. So there's a separate contract of your policy that guides
Okay.
the difference between between the insurance company and the contracted provider. So everything they're doing is based on their contract, not your contract.
So you've got basically 2 contracts. The provider has a contract with the insurance company
If it's a
to talk
contracted
about
provider,
how it's
correct.
gonna get covered, and then you have a contract with the insurance company,
With the
you as
benefits,
you as a
with your
consumer.
benefits, correct.
So you've got 2 contracts, like, how do you keep those from being conflicting?
Well, they do conflict sometimes. They do, because I'll give you an example that will be good. My policy has says I have to file a claim within 1 year. If I don't file it within 1 year, it's denied. And it'll say 1 year from the date of service, Mary. So if it's March 1st, 2024, I have a year to submit the claim April 1, 2024. But if the provider is contracted, their contract may say they have to submit your claim within 90 days or 180 days. If they don't do it, then they don't get any money.
And what about you? What about the
The
consumer?
provider has to write it off. You don't have to pay a dime.
Oh,
So they're held to standards with the insurance company. Or if they forget to pre authorize your services, it's a write off to the provider. They screwed up and didn't follow their contract with the insurance. So they have to write it off.
okay,
So
so you're not always sure if a denial is because the insurance doesn't wanna pay or because something was done wrong from the provider side.
correct, but only for
Okay.
contracted providers. So If you're dealing with a contractor provider, it's generally pretty easy, the process moves along pretty darn easily and it's not too much. You'll get occasional wrinkles that you got to deal with, but
Mhm.
they now I did see some hospitals recently that forgot to authorize and they're trying to wiggle out of taking the write off and are billing the family.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Yes.
No, 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 no,
So
no.
that's yeah. So that's the questions people are having, like, there's all these little nuances that make it
Yes.
really confusing, right?
Yes. Well, let me
So
give you another
if
example. I'll give you one more quick example. So the insurance company forgets to pre-authorize but they use an outside company. So now we got the facility using an outside company to do the pre-auth who isn't a party to the original contract. And so
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 just
so there can
just
be
for
layers. It's the layers that you have to be careful
yeah,
of.
yeah, you've got a lot of connections, business connections, B2B, from hospital to biller to pre-auth. Now let's just back up just a second because I need to make sure that everybody's listening understands what pre-auth stands for. So pre-auth, tell me a little bit about pre-auth just so we get the definition for everyone and everybody understands what pre-auth means.
Well, insurance companies have lists of what they require pre-authorization for. Hospitalization, surgery. Sometimes they want second opinions. Sometimes they may need it for particular surgeries, like gastric bypass or, things of that type of nature where they want the facility or the surgeon or someone to call in and say, "Hey, Mary needs to come in and get an appendectomy." Well, it's not an emergency, the insurance company says, but then you go on to say, "Well, she's had pain, she's had bloating, and the doctor's telling them why you need to go in." And they go, "Okay, we're going to authorize an admission and we're going to cover 3 days." And if Mary's still there on the fourth day, pick up the phone and call us and tell us why she needs to stay there. And we may authorize more days.
So
So
there is someone sitting on the other end of the phone when you go in or have something scheduled that is saying yay or nay right up front.
correct, and many
Okay.
times the doctors will try to do it in advance of the admission, so you don't get there that day to be admitted and they go, "Oh, sorry, you need to go home now." So, there's all of this process between the facilities and the doctors and everyone that want to get the care authorized, and
Okay.
so the insurance company has a pre-authorization department. Most hospitals have nurses and therapists and people that do the calls into the insurance company. And if they deny it, then they can do what we call a peer to peer review. And the insurance company doctor talks to the facility doctor and they try to work it out. There's nothing worse than getting a pre authorization denial.
So there's some negotiation going on. So thanks for covering pre-auth because and there's also utilization review. Like it's after, right? It's after the fact. Like when you're staying someplace, they constantly follow up to make sure you're covered for extended stays and things like that, right?
Yes. Well, utilization review is the parent of pre auth. So
Yeah.
that's the process. So pre authorization includes an initial authorization, which we call prospective. Then there's concurrent. After they give you the first so many days, then the concurrent review is all the days after the initial days they gave you. And then if everybody forgets to pre-auth, the policy may have and the contract may have a retrospective review. So all of those are covered under the umbrella of utilization review. So utilization review is the process of all those different pre-authorization processes.
And what I'm thinking as you're talking through all this, like this is confusing, right? This is like, oh my
It
gosh,
does. It
if
gets very
I was a
confusing.
consumer, but I'm thinking all of those are opportunities for denial. Like all those are opportunities for something to go wrong.
But all of
And
those are also opportunities to appeal.
true. So let's talk about that because, I get this denial and I'm like, okay, so I read my EOBs. I totally disagree with what they're trying to say about my claim and they're wrong and it was medically necessary or I was covered based on what I see on the plan. What are my rights? as an insured person to go and fight back and say, what are my legal grounds? What steps do you think I should take? And I just asked like multiple questions at the same time. I'm just needing you to answer one. Let me go back. What legal grounds and rights do I have as an insured person?
Well, both state and federal laws provide an opportunity for you to appeal any denial. The kicker is that there's a time frame attached to appealing.
Hmm.
And so some people lead very, very busy lives and they're too busy. They're taking care of their loved one, maybe their grandparents, their mother. They're so saddled at work, they don't have 5 minutes to think about it. You just have to remember that's why it's important to open every envelope when you get it. Look at every EOB. If you see a denial for any reason, look at the date of the decision and know you have generally 180 days to appeal. That is the standard. So you need to jot it down somewhere, stick it up on the fridge, do whatever you need to do. You got 180 days to appeal a denial. If you fail, you're out. If you appeal and it denies throughout, you can go legal. But if you fail to timely file your appeal, you are out. You will be billed for those services unless you can find a way to stick it on the provider.
Hey there, listeners. Enjoying the show so far? Don't miss out on any future episodes. Click the subscribe button now to stay up to date with all our latest insights and tips on navigating insurance claims. Your support helps us bring you this valuable content every week. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show.
Okay, so first I get a denial, right? I read my EOBs, I call, I ask some questions to maybe the provider, maybe the insurance company. Then I have the opportunity to appeal. So, what steps? What's the next step? Okay, I'm going to appeal this. I'm not happy with their decision. I don't agree with the answers I've received. I mean, what's my next step? Like, how do I know, okay, mine's 180 days and I've got 180 days to appeal. Like, where do you start? Like, how do you get that going?
Well, you do need to talk to somebody. If you've done it before and it's a denial reason you've never seen, you should get advice. If nothing else, I just talked to a family this morning. Good God, they got a denial, a final denial. The facility appealed, did the peer-to-peer review through the utilization review process. It denied. They did a phone appeal, which took the family's internal appeal, and all they did was talk to the insurance company on the phone. Then I said to her, I dictated an email for her to send to the facility and ask the questions that needed to be answered. And then she called me before I came into this meeting or to do this podcast with you. And oh, good Lord, again, a denial at the external review level, final and binding.
Oh, no.
Final and binding. And nobody sent any evidence except the facility's records. So the family had no opportunity to gather evidence in support of the appeal. So it's terrible. It's the worst thing. And I just hung up from her before I came in here, and I was almost sobbing with her. But we may have some avenues because the external review cut the last date off that they reviewed on September the 3rd. Today's September the 10th. And I said, oh my gosh, and I'm making up a name, Denise, I think we may have the ability to go and get days after 9/3. Child admitted on 7/31. They denied beginning, I think it was August 28th. So from August 20, maybe 22nd to 9/3 was all that the external review reviewed. They said it was final and binding. The only problem I have is in the denial letter from the external review company, the final and binding one, they said, this is the final and we've reviewed from this date forward. That can kill you. Sometimes the insurance company just says we reviewed 8:22 to 9:03, and you still have an opportunity. So it's dangerous, so dangerous for this family. And the child just got there in July 31st, my birthday. And it's the most horrendous thing that can happen.
Yes, I understand that, and I think when I'm listening to you talk about this story and kind of what we're trying to share with the listeners is that you have to take steps carefully,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Don't let anybody do anything until you understand what they're going to do and how it's going to affect your claim. If people go on and on about knowing stuff, but they don't know really how it's going to hurt you financially. And they're work for the hospital. They're in a big hurry to get you through the mill, you know? No, do
Yes.
not let anybody do anything. If they write and say we're going to appeal, say nope, don't do anything. I need the denial letter. I need to look at my policy. I need to look at the reasons. And I need to talk to somebody that knows what they're doing because I am not going to have you eat up all my appeals and ruin my ability to get this money.
Okay, so let's talk about appeals because obviously you said that they had their appeal basically used up. And I'm assuming from the verbal appeal that they were told they could do, right? So, how many appeals can you do? I mean, if I send an appeal in, insurance company responds, isn't that the appeal process?
No, every policy has different levels of appeal. You always have at least one internal appeal, and then if it's medical necessity type, you'll get an external appeal.
Mhm. Okay, so that's
Some
2.
policies have two internal levels
Oh,
and then an external.
that's 3.
That's three.
3 opportunities to
Mhm.
win.
Sometimes you have one, and some are voluntary and some are mandatory. So
Oh, okay.
usually the level one is mandatory. You can't sue anybody till you get that done.
All right.
And then if it's two, sometimes this one, the second one, is voluntary and you don't have to do it if it's medical necessity. You can go straight to external to the third
Okay.
one. And so
Okay.
that all begins again by not letting anybody do anything till you know how many levels of appeal you have. You can ask the facility to blow one level so you can get to the external faster, but you don't want to ever let anyone use up your appeals because once you get a denial, you have to put on your mini lawyer hat. I'll call it a mini lawyer hat. Like, where's
Oh
my
god, I don't
evidence?
wanna be a
Like, it's
lawyer.
like going to trial. Where's my
Yes.
evidence? How do I prove that this stuff is covered? How do I prove that it's medically necessary? So
Let's talk about that.
never, never, never let anyone do an appeal for you until you fully understand the process and that no one is effing with it and going to screw you up.
We don't want to be screwed up.
No.
Well, you talked a lot about evidence and documentation. So maybe you can help us, understand what documentation is necessary to get ready for that next step, which in this case, we were talking about doing an appeal. So help me understand a little bit about, what do you recommend gathering together to get ready for this appeal? You know, in this case, we were talking about we got 6 months from the date of denial to do that. What do we need to get together to prepare for an appeal?
Well, I think you should talk to someone that knows what they're doing because the evidence is based off of the denial reason or the denial rationale.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure that you know. And depending on the denial type, leads you to what evidence you need. But before you even do that, you need someone who knows insurance to look at your insurance policy. There are so many little places in the policy that may help you that you don't have the strategy to know that that piece in the policy is something you're going to use against the insurance company. So that is why claim work it's all strategy based. Yes, you can talk to someone and they will tell you. If it's a coverage issue, you usually only need your policy, maybe some state laws, federal laws, depending on what type of policy you have. Medical necessity is a whole nother ball of wax, and you want to make sure that you're getting everything that you need. And that again is based on why they denied and the rationale. So they'll say this is not medically necessary, and they'll give you 4 or 5 sentences why they believe it's not medically necessary. So it's those statements that form the basis of what evidence you need.
So I heard two things you were talking about. One would be a coverage appeal, that those are a lot simpler, and that, looking at the plan and determining, maybe whether it was an exclusion or where in your plan, the long plan that you get from the insurance company, which actually we haven't even talked about that. Let's talk about the plan a little. Is that what I get when I enroll in my benefits?
You should get a policy. The law requires that you have access to one. If you're work for a big company like Delta Airlines or Walmart, they are responsible to give you your policy. And if you don't have it, you go straight to human resources and you say, I need my policy. And sometimes you have to dig it out of them. There's a federal law that requires that they give it to you. If you formally request it in writing, if they don't give it to you within 30 days, they can have a penalty against them for $110 a day for every day they don't give it to you. State law, if it's not a big conglomerate, it's a small mom and pop operation or a medium sized group like 100 employees, that may be a fully insured policy where they just pay the insurance company a premium. And that is overseen by state law. So state law requires that they give you a book. If they don't give you a book, you can file a complaint with the state insurance department and say, I need my book. And you need to get the book at the beginning. Remember, we talked just a bit earlier. When you get that denial, go get your book.
Go get your plan. Go
get your book. Go get your policy, your plan documents. So every insurance company calls that booklet something different. United calls it a certificate of coverage. I think Anthem calls theirs evidence of coverage book. It can be a policy. It can be a policy handbook. So you must know how your insurance company, what they call it. So it's important to know that, because when you're asking your employer for it, you want to know what to ask for. So you can talk to the insurance company and say, what's the name of my policy? What do you guys call it? Same way an insurance company calls some people who are insured with them members or insureds or subscribers. So everybody, it's like this little language everybody uses.
And I have a lingo.
And everybody has their own lingo, each insurance company. So
kind of like my teenager.
Yes.
They have their own little lingo.
They sure do. So you don't know your insurance company lingo. So again, if you're having trouble getting it, you want to talk to an advocate. And sometimes what we do is the family comes to us and they're having trouble getting their book. And we have a million books. We save them all. And so we know what employer it is. So we even have books for certain employers. So we'll send the family a sample and say, send this to your human resource department. And that's the book we need.
The current one.
We want the current one of this book.
Current one.
Yes. And sometimes we get lucky and we already have it. So
but you also probably want to see what their insurance card looks like.
Yes, we always get the front and back of the ID card, the insurance ID card, because that gives us all kinds of hints about how your policy is purchased, whether it's a big conglomerate company or a little company, whether it's a PPO or an HMO. So there's all kinds of tricks that we use to get the ID card and use that information. Also, we ask families a lot of questions. They're always like, Mary, this is a lot of questions. And I'm like, it's going to be a lot of questions because I have a lot of questions that I need to get answered before I can tell you what you got to do.
Yeah. So what other things should the family or the patient, consumer, what else should they gather together?
I think initially a copy of the denial, number 1. 2, your policy. 3, your ID card, your summary of benefits. And then you want to talk to an advocate and see, what needs to be done. We talk about gamesmanship. I always laugh and tell families, I go, insurance is like a game. It's strategy. So I kind of talk about, when I play Monopoly with my grandchildren, I check the rules. Do I trust them? Maybe, but I always look at the rules before I start the game. And
Yep.
so everything about the game is in the rules, and all the rules are in your policy. So if we're going to play the game, let's make sure we're looking at the rules before we start because
Some
we don't want to be caught with our pants down. Like, we write an appeal and we're like, you owe us this, and they write and say, no, on page 87 it's excluded. You want to know that in advance so you can
right.
look for a workaround to get around that exclusion. Maybe there's a law that says they can't have that exclusion. So you need to be more savvy about how you go about working up these denials.
Well, I know that you said, reaching out to an advocate is very, very helpful, important. And I know there's a lot of resources out there. Some people might want to write their own appeal, but I mean, there's so much information going into this game, going to the strategy, right? But there are things besides just the appeal piece that, suggestions during this process that we like to make sure that patients or consumers know. And maybe you can touch on some of those communication tips that you have to make sure you don't go down the wrong rabbit hole with the insurance company while you're going through this process, because at this point you have 6 months or less than that at this point on our example. And if I'm going to call the insurance company or communicate with the insurance company, what suggestions do you have to make sure that nothing goes wrong?
Danger. That's dangerous.
Sure, why? I could call
Danger,
my insurance
danger,
company.
Dan. Don't call your insurance company. And if you do, you got to know how to talk, because one thing they want to do is trick you into doing a phone appeal.
What's that?
That's where they get you on the phone and you bitch about their denial. And then they say, well, would you like to appeal it? And you go, yeah, I want to appeal it. And then they set up a 1-page thing and send your case to the appeal department. And there was no evidence or anything. They just did it on your phone call. So you must be so very careful when you talk to an insurance company about a denial you receive, because they're tricky little buggers.
They basically, like, if you have one appeal in your plan, then that appeal's gone once they accept your quote unquote verbal appeal, phone appeal.
Exactly.
Oh
And
boy.
if it's a coverage issue, you're done. So
Done.
you're done. You'd have to go get a lawyer, but a lawyer won't take your case because you didn't exhaust your administrative appeal remedies in the policy properly, and
I
there's
know.
no evidence in the administrative appeal record. So
Yeah.
lawyers don't take cases unless the administrative appeal record is solid and has
And the
everything they need to win.
administrative appeal record is what you submit to the insurance company.
Yes. And
Okay.
that is with all the evidence, a copy of the denial, a copy of all your evidence. And if that's not there and they tricked you and did a phone call, but there's no evidence in the appeal record, you will never win in litigation. You
I
won't.
really I've heard about this before, obviously, because I work with you, but I still can't believe that they can get away with that. And then that's not become something that, that they're not responsible for fixing. I just really can't believe it. But like when you send correspondence or you're talking to them on the phone, I mean, they have record of it, right?
They do. They record all phone calls.
And so any suggestions to those type of recorded calls, how you can kind of make sure that you're not getting yourself in trouble?
Well, you could say, does my policy have a grievance procedure? So some policies have a grievance procedure and an appeal procedure.
Oh,
So again, another reason to have your policy. So you know how much wiggle room you can do with them directly. And then maybe I can send a grievance and then I can get into the initial appeals. So
okay.
what you want to do is you don't want to be tricked. You want to be a good consumer of healthcare, and you want to know your rights and your obligations so that if you have to appeal, you can win. The whole idea is to win the game, right? We got to win the game, and the game has to be won by strategy and knowing what to do and how to do it and when to do it.
Well, I think that all those tips were very helpful because when you start out with a denial, most people really never received one before. right? I mean, a lot of people, it's the first time they've ever received a denial. So I think a lot of those tips are helpful to understand, what documents you need, what's your legal recourse, what steps do you take, what cautions should you have. But I think you were going to share a personal story or a case that you were dealing with recently that you wanted to share that's going to shed some light on kind of how the process works.
Yeah, well, I had a lady that went into the hospital and she thought the facility was in network, and everyone believed the facility was in network. She had about a $30,000 claim, and the claim denied out of network, and it paid as out of network. So it paid, I want to say, like less than 3,000 of the $30,000 claim, and they were responsible for the difference. And this claim, the husband is a lawyer and his father is a lawyer here in Utah. And so they reached out to me, and we looked at it, and we appealed it for them, and we said, no, this is in network. And we thought they were going to give some pushback. And lo and behold, they wrote a letter and said, yes, you're correct. It's in network. What kind of evidence did we get? We got stuff off their portal showing that the provider was in the network, right? And so we were able then to send the medical records and do all of that and ask them to once again review it. And so that one turned out good, took one letter, all better. But they knew enough to say, okay, this is out of our league. We're going to go talk to Mary and fix my claim, and we're going to have it done correctly so that we can make sure that there is a good record. So attorneys are good that way because they know that stuff. So they're actually the better clients for us to have because they know what the tricks of the trade may be. So they want to make sure they're with somebody that knows that kind of thing. So the family's getting an additional check for $27,000, I believe, and we'll see how that one goes. But they haven't paid the claim yet, but they've confirmed that they will. So that was a good outcome.
I like that. I like when you're able to support and pitch in and help and get people going the right direction because, that was like $27,000 that they weren't expecting to pay. I mean, I'm sure they thought, okay, I've got a deductible or I've got an out of pocket max, but I'm sure the $27,000 was not how they planned on spending their paycheck that day.
No, I'm sure of that. There's no
Exactly.
doubt. And again, it's just stress, it's scary, but it's not that scary. I mean, and I can say that only because I've been doing insurance for 53 years. So you just want to make sure that you do your due diligence and you take that time to investigate and don't do anything that can damage your claim. Because once it's damaged, sometimes it's hard to get it undamaged and move forward. And people say I'm the queen of figuring out a way to get back in, and I am. I can usually, I'd say probably 60% of the time, I can find a way back into the claim, even if the family's messed it up. So
But it's usually a lot more
don't
work.
feel too nervous if you've already messed it up, because generally the insurance company messes up. I'll give you an example. A family called us, and child was in a treatment program, a residential treatment program for about a year, and they had a denial letter, and it was past the 180 days. So my team said, oh, this is past the 180 days. We're never going to be able to help this family. And Aetna's famous for this. They wrote a denial letter where they only denied one day. So that left all the rest of the days of the full year of treatment available for appeal.
So there's a lot going into the detail of what you see and what's going on. Don't just take it for face value. There's got to be a little research going on. And I think a lot of people, I think for me, when I, started learning more about this process, for me, it was like, well, don't let things sit. Like, don't wait. Take action. Get to understand what's going on. Don't panic, right? Find an advocate if you have one, like ourselves. And, you start to open the box and see what's inside. And it's usually not as scary as you think it is, right?
Yes, usually after I talk to a family in their free review, which takes about 30 minutes, usually 20 to 30 minutes,
Mhm.
I can make a family feel much more comfortable about proceeding towards an appeal. And I feel comfortable that they're not going to damage their claim. So
Yes.
just hearing from an expert about how it can be fixed and how it's going to be okay, and that there's some hope there for getting an overturn of that unwanted denial.
Well, I really hope, we went through a lot of information today. Sometimes it's a little more detailed than people understand, but just in general, I think we did a great job of helping out and being helpful. And if you find this episode helpful, check out our detailed guideline on fighting insurance claims denials at www.fixmyclaim.com. And it's packed with tools and templates to help you build your strong case. And we'd like to help you with that if that's something you'd like to do. And please hit the subscribe button. We release the new episode every week, and to help you navigate with the complex world of insurance claims. And Mary, do you have one passing word to say before we go on to the next episode?
Yes, never give up. Be sure to visit our website at www.fixmyclaim.com, where you can subscribe to the show on all major audio and video platforms so you'll never miss an episode. If you find value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. For more resources on navigating insurance claims, check out our blog and free guides available on our website. Don't forget to follow us on social media and join our community for ongoing support and updates. Tune in next week for another episode filled with guidance, reassurance, and the knowledge you need to secure the benefits you and your family deserve. Until then, remember, you have the power to fix your claim.